It's absolutely fascinating. But you're saying that Dugin's influence is exaggerated in Western media. There's claims that he is constantly whispering in Putin's ear and crafting policy. If that's not true, and we also know that the US isn't necessarily opposed to collaborating with right-wing parties, be it in Ukraine or even Italy, any of these places historically. So if that's not their issue with Dugin, why is it that they are so obsessed by him, and what is actually threatening about him?
What the one thing that they find particularly threatening about him is not any far right views or he has, or far left views, and he does actually have a few of those as well. But that his very strident anti-Americanism, his opposition to U.S.-led Western hegemony, something that I agree with him, though perhaps not quite as stridently as him. Certainly, there's some tactics of his that I have not supported in the pursuit of that. But that's why, because he's against U.S. foreign policy and, quote, leadership or policeman or hegemony of the world, whatever you want to call it. No, he's never advised the Kremlin. He's never met with Putin. He's never spoken with Putin. He's not Putin's brain. His ideas that are critical of the U.S. are actually quite common across a whole stretch of political movements and ideologies in Russia, be that the communists or so on. So it's not like these are unique. And the ideas of the Eurasian Union really don't have any ideological grounding, certainly not in the branch of Eurasianism that Aleksandr Dugin has put forward, although he would probably wishes that it were so.
Is he gaining influence in Europe at all now, though? Is his figure rising, perhaps even as a result of this media attention?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I know that he is talks to some fringe political figures in Europe, but I haven't seen that he certainly doesn't have any greater support in Russia. After some extremist statements after the U.S.-backed putsch in Ukraine, he was kicked out of his position at Moscow as a professor at Moscow State University, and he's never regained it, and he is no longer frequent as a pundit or analyst or political thinker on Russian state TV. So he is not given any type of platform there. So I wouldn't see his star is definitely not on the rise. If anything, somewhat the opposite. I mean, he does have his fringe support in the country and outside the country, but I don't think that it is very significant or influential. I once hoped that he would become kind of an ideological guru and one-man think tank behind the Eurasian Union, but I think the truth is that for all the good and bad things about the man, he's far too much of a street radical and a far too in love with controversy and really at the end far too philosophical and esoteric to have any type of pragmatic political influence.
Dugin has this interesting quote. He actually said, "Marxism is often correct when it describes the enemy." What does Dugin mean by this, and how has he studied left-wing thinking and applied it to right-wing organizing?
Yeah, Dugin, he kind of came to political flowering in the 80s as, political barriers were beginning to break in the Soviet Union, and then the early 90s. And he kind of explored right, left, outside, inside, all types of political theories. He studied Marxism, he studied fascism, and he was looking for something new or some new ways to spin things. And this actually kind of came to a fruition in the book that I translated for him into English, The Fourth Political Theory, where he takes a look at the three dominant branches of political theories in the last in the 20th century and just before it, liberalism, Marxism, and fascism, and he critiques each one of them. He says where each one of them is wrong, and he also points out some good points of each one of them. I mean, he attempts to craft wholesale, perhaps not entirely successfully, but kind of a good, and he would admit that himself, but a step in the first direction of kind of a new political theory, drawing from the good points while rejecting the bad of each of those. And he is, when it comes to Marxism, certainly its critique of capitalism would be his one of his primary viewpoints, at least the way it's implemented in the West and the way it becomes integrated in liberal democratic politics. If not in the type of specific communism that Marx suggested in the Communist Manifesto.